Hi there, this is Shauna from the Foiled Fox, and I'm here today with another project. I thought I would squeeze in one more Mother's Day card, but you can use this stamp for anything. It's a really gracious wreath. It's from Concord and 9th. It's the Wreath Turnabout, and then I'm also using the My Favorite Things Mom Die and the Mom Sentiment. Here's a close-up, and you can see how beautiful that wreath is. So using the top wreath of the Concord and 9th, and then the small mom, and then the Best Mom Ever sentiment. So I'm going to start out with the wreath die. And there's two in this one. You can have just the ring of the wreath or the top one that's full, and I'm going to use the top. And they have that orientation on the back side to help you with the center of it. So what I did is I actually took the stamp out and I laid it directly onto that illustration on the back where it has those cross lines, and I marked them directly onto the stamp so I know what is center. And then I found the center of my 5x5 piece of Nina Solar White cardstock, and so I laid that stamp right on top of the center of the stamp onto the center of the paper so that they're aligned. So I'm starting to stamp these. I'm starting out with a brown delicata. I'm using all delicata inks. They have a beautiful shimmer to them. This was the brown. I stamped it twice. I rotated it a quarter turn, and now I'm using the silver delicata. I'm going to stamp this twice because I want to have a little bit more saturation to it. I'm making sure that I clean them very well in between. I'm using a baby wipe and sometimes the Lawn Fawn chamois just to get it really clean. The third color, you can see I checked there. I hadn't turned it that quarter turn, so I wanted to check that before I stamped. I'm using the rose gold delicata. I'm actually going to stamp this 3 times, again, just to get the color that I'm looking for. And once I've finished with the rose, I'm going to go on to the final color. I'm going to rotate it the final turn. This will be the 4th turn. And then I'm going to use the Champagne Delicata. Now the Champagne Delicata is quite pale, and so I'm going to stamp it many times. In fact, I think I counted, I stamped it 8 times. And I was just trying to get that champagne to really show up. It's a very delicate color, it's quite beautiful, and it's a beautiful complement, but I did need to stamp it 8 times. And that's the beauty of using a Misty or a Tim Holtz stamping platform or any of the others that are on the market. To do these turnarounds, to make them kind of trouble-free, you really do need a stamp positioning tool. Plus, like here, you're stamping it so many times, I want to make sure that I have it in the right position and I'm stamping directly over the previous stamping. Now I'm going to wipe this off extremely well. I'm using that chamois to get into those little crevices. And then once I get that really clean, I'm going to take it out of the platform, and I'm going to use the heart and the 3 large berries. The large berries I'm going to stamp with the silver delicata and the heart with the rose gold. And I'm just going to stamp them randomly. It's just filling out that design and adding a little bit more interest. You do have to be a little bit careful here though. You want to make sure you don't stamp too much where it becomes too cluttered. I'm rotating the heart orientation and the berries just to make it look where it flows with the design. With that finished, I'm going to go on and die cut the mom. We're using the small mom. I'm going to die cut it twice out of Candied Heart heavy cardstock. And I'm cutting it twice because I want to stack them on top of one another twice, these letters. And I'm saving that negative space where it was cut out from, because that will help me position it on the card properly. So I'm using some Tombow liquid adhesive, and I'm stamping, I am gluing one right on top of the other. Now, I started to do it 3 times, but I decided I only wanted to do it 2 times. So it's 2 die cuts, one glued on top of the other. Now, on this O, it's not completely round, so if you use this, be sure you get it in the right orientation. It's a little bit oval. With that ready, I just placed it back in its little place that it had come out of, and we'll get back to that later. So I'm going to stamp the Best Mom Ever sentiment. I'm using some brown heavy cardstock. I think it's peanut fudge. And I'm going to stamp it with VersaFine ink. Now first I use the anti-static powder so that since I'll be heat embossing, I don't want that embossing powder to stick everywhere where it shouldn't. So I'm using Hero Arts white embossing powder, and I'm just taking a really tiny bristle brush, and I'm just flicking away any errant little specks of embossing powder. Once that's all done, then I'm going to heat emboss it. I'm melting all of that embossing powder so it gets nice and bold and a little bit raised. And then I'm going to trim it to be very thin so it won't have much height. And using a piece of beautiful shimmer quartz paper. It's a beautiful paper. It's a nice complement with a delicata. I didn't say that quite right. It's shimmer quartz. And I'm using that as my card base. And I cut a piece of that Candied Heart paper that's a little bit larger than the wreath panel, but a little smaller than the card base, just so that it just shows a little frame around the wreath panel. And then to pop up the wreath panel, I'm using some dimensional foam tape. I'm going all the way around it, and then I'll put one in the center just to give it support so it doesn't sink in the center. This dimensional tape is wonderful. I buy it in the huge rolls. We have it on our website. You can buy it in all sorts of lengths, but it is wonderful. It's not too high. It's just the right height. So I'm going to position this over the pink panel. Now, one of the other beauties of this foam tape is it's easy to lift up if you haven't felt like you positioned it just right, and you can reposition it. Now on to the mom sentiment. So I'm using that piece of negative cutout, and I'm just taking some pieces, 2 pieces of washi tape, and just lightly put it in position. I'm kind of eyeballing it, but I decide later that I want to be extra careful. I rarely do, but I am measuring this time. I'm using my trusty L see-through ruler that I can't live without, and I'm making sure that it's all spaced properly. And then once it is, I'm taking more of that Tombow glue, and I'm going to just put it around the MOM and push it back into the place that it came from. This helps make a perfect position for your die cuts. I don't know if you're like me, but I sometimes have a really hard time getting them straight and properly spaced, and this just makes it perfect. Now, I would suggest waiting for those pieces to dry in place, but as usual, I was rushing it, and so the second M kind of came out of position, but I was able to just put it back down, push it in position, and then peel up the negative space area. And then now I just add the sentiment. I just trimmed a little off the side there. And then I'm positioning it right over the mom. That does have a piece of dimensional foam tape. And then the final touch is adding some enamel dots. These are from My Mind's Eye in Bloom. The colors are a perfect complement. So I'm going to be using some of that rose pink and the cream. Now you of course can use something like Nouveau crystal or jewel dots or drops, excuse me, or you can use any kind of dimensional kind of drop, but I like using these enamel dots because they're perfectly uniform. You can actually reposition them if you need to. And for something like this, I wanted it to be able to move it around if I need to get the right position. When you're using those drops, it's a little harder to bring it back up and not have it show a mark. So there it is, it's all finished. And I'm showing this a close-up, but I don't know if you can see it on camera, but those inks just have such a beautiful shimmer. It's quite subtle, but it's very elegant. And I couldn't leave it alone. I had to add one more touch, so I put the card back into the MISTI, open it up on the inside, and I'm just stamping it once just for a smattering of leaves, and I stamp that with the rose gold. So here is the card, and you can see that with the leaves on the inside to give a little more interest. And then you can see that completely finished. I want to thank you so much for joining us. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please give us a thumbs up. And if you haven't already, please subscribe and tell your friends to subscribe too. Also, just as a reminder, you can always pop over to our blog. We have lots of other projects. We always have a complete supply list. And you can go to our website where we have all our supplies there. Thanks for joining us. Bye.